Let's get in further perspectives now from our guest joining us this evening, Muthapandi Ganeshan, barrister law, joining us from London. Also joining us is our London Bureau Chief, Mandy Clark. Mandy, let me come to you straight first. You were there inside the court. Tell us what happened and how Vijay Mallya's body language looked like in the moments after the judge pronounced that verdict. All right, we'll just try and reconnect that line with Mandy Clark. But Muthapandi Ganeshan is with us. Let me begin by asking you, this of course is a long-drawn procedure that follows after the judgment that was delivered today. So help our viewers understand, procedurally speaking, what the next few days and weeks and months are going to look like.
Thank you. So in terms of going forward, today the senior magistrate has ordered extradition. What that means under the Extradition Act 2003 is that the matter now proceeds to the Secretary of State, and the Secretary of State has an opportunity to consider any representations that may be made, and he has a very specific duty to consider if there are any objections to Mr. Vijay Mallya or Dr. Vijay Mallya being extradited to India. And the process is normally the person who's subject to extradition has 4 weeks to make any further representations, and the Secretary of State then has further 4 weeks to make the decision as to whether Dr. Vijay Mallya should be extradited or not. So really, the next 2 months is a critical period in which Dr. Vijay Mallya's defense team will have to make further representations if they so wish, but also at the same time they can make an initial appeal to the High Court.
So the next step, as we've been pointing out, will be the Secretary of State of the UK providing that rubber stamp for the next step to go forward. But Vijay Mallya does have 14 days to appeal.
That is absolutely correct. And the Secretary of State is not a question of rubber stamping. It is a question of going through the particular criteria under the Extradition Act 2003, which looks at factors like death penalty, looks at factors like whether the person has been extradited from a third country, and a couple of other factors. So it's really the question whether any additional material or additional information or representations that the Dr. Vijay Mallya's defense team would want to put forward in the next 4 weeks. So really they have until 10th of January to put that forward, and then we have until 10th of February or the 11th of February for the Secretary of State, Right Honourable Mr. Sajid Javid, to make the decision as to whether Dr. Vijay Mallya should be extradited or not. But once that decision is made, then of course, if the Secretary of State is in agreement with the Westminster Magistrates Court that Dr. Vijay Mallya should be extradited to India, then of course the appeal process moves from the Secretary of State to the High Court to the Divisional Court.
All right, stay with me. I'll just come back to you, Muthapandi. Also getting in some reactions. Of course, this is a story that we've been tracking all evening and multiple reactions have been coming in. Let's begin by telling you what India's Finance Minister Arun Jaitley had to say shortly after that verdict came in. He took to Twitter to say, and I'm quoting, "It's a great day for India as the UK court orders extradition of Vijay Mallya." Jaitley then targeted the opposition Congress, alleging that the party benefited offender Vijay Mallya. Let's also take a listen in to what he said.
The judgment of the Magisterial Court in London extraditing to India an accused who has embezzled a lot of bank money and then sought shelter in the United Kingdom is a great victory for India. It's a victory for ethics and probity. It's also a signal to all that nobody can cheat India, its people, its economy, and then go hide somewhere in the world, and India will never be able to get at him. However powerful and important you are, the law is certainly above you. And wherever you hide in the world after cheating this country, India will find you out. And that is what seems to have happened.
Muthupandi Ganesan has been telling us more about what the procedure will look like over the next few days, weeks and months. It's going to be a long-drawn process, of course, Muthupandi, but you were telling us about the factors that the UK Secretary of State will be taking into consideration before going ahead and actually giving the formal signature on that court verdict today, which, of course, will be the first step in the several to come for Vijay Mallya to be brought back to India. Any time frame apart from the first step that we have in mind? How long before Vijay Mallya could actually be brought back to India? Of course, we're also looking at his appeal within 14 days.
Yeah, in terms of the time frame, is difficult to predict apart from the fact that we know they had the initial 4 weeks to make representations, which takes us into the 10th of January. Then we have further 4 weeks for the Secretary of State to make the decision. But assuming the Secretary of State also is in agreement with the senior magistrate at the Westminster Magistrates Court that there is no bar to extradition of Dr. Vijay Mallya to India, then what this means is that the matter then moves to the divisional court in London, and that is a process that could take anything between 6 months to 12 months. It really depends on whether Dr. Vijay Mallya and his legal team get permission to appeal in London.
All right. And as far as the appeal goes, of course, the argument that Vijay Mallya has had all along is that it's a politically motivated case against him. But he's also offered to pay back 100% of the principal loan amount. How seriously would that help, if at all, in his favor while filing that appeal? Because he's been making those statements repeatedly. He made that statement today as well while going in for that hearing.
That's an interesting point, but really in terms of the appeal will be focused on the decisions that has been made by the senior magistrate that at the Westminster Magistrates Court. And that appeal will have to focus on the findings of the fact as made by the judge. And that was particularly in relation to whether there was a prima facie case of fraud, and also other arguments in relation to Article 3 and 6 of the European Convention on Human Rights, focusing on the prison conditions and also focusing on whether Dr. Vijay Mallya would get a fair trial in India, bearing in mind the allegations of political motivation. But the point that the court has made, and that's through the lengthy judgment that has been given, is that the court is satisfied on the review of the evidence that there is a prima facie case for Dr. Vijay Mallya to answer. And also the court is satisfied that the prison conditions are humane and that there is no bar in terms of political motivation of the request. And those are the matters that the divisional court will consider on any appeal. And the divisional court will hear, no doubt, arguments and submissions from Dr. Vijay Mallya's team as to why the judge has got her findings wrong. And we will have to wait and see that, how that is actually framed.
All right. Muthupandi Ganesan, stay with me before we just take the next step forward and talk a little bit more about the arguments that Vijay Mallya has been making. Just a quick roundup for our viewers who might just be tuning in. That is the big developing story that we have been tracking for you. Vijay Mallya has his extradition has been ordered by that court in UK, as Muthupandi Ganesan, who's been dealing with extradition cases for decades now, has been telling us of the procedure that will follow in the next few days, weeks and months. The next step forward will be the UK Secretary of State actually giving the go-ahead for the next step. Vijay Mallya will have 14 days now to make that appeal. Muthupandi, also in terms of the arguments that Vijay Mallya has made all along, we have been, of course, talking about how he said that he did make it very clear that he is willing to pay up 100% of that principal loan amount. How strongly do you think, going back to the earlier point that you were making, will that really work in his favor, given your experience with extradition trials?
As I was trying to explain earlier, it is a question of, on appeal, whether the factors and findings by the senior magistrate at the Westminster Magistrates Court was wrong in law or in fact. That's the question. The issue about repayment of the monies is a subsidiary, or at least an ancillary issue. We will have to wait and see how Dr. Vijay Mallya's team pen any appeal that they want to bring forward, and also the factors in which they lie.
All right, so procedurally speaking, that's a time frame that we're looking at, Muthapandi. But of course, given your experience, this is going to be a long drawn process, isn't it?
And take appropriate steps thereafter.
The extradition of Dr. Vijay Mallya, no doubt the matter then proceeds to the two judges will hear the appeal. That's on the basis that a assumption permission is going to be given for that to happen. But in terms of what happens after that, the appeal process can easily take anything between 6 and 12 months for the divisional team. But also the matter of attention. If an appeal is given from the divisional court on a point of general importance.